I'm Levi, and you're watching The Thinking Shooter. Hey, welcome to The Thinking Shooter. Thank you for joining us for our pilot episode to kick the channel off, guys. Welcome and thank you again for joining us here. I wanted to make this first video a history on the name and a what to expect from the channel. So we'll not waste too much time here. This might be a little bit longer video here. The history behind the name. So the Thinking Shooter, back when I used to teach Air Force boot camp kids, for simple terms, all of us instructors, we had our own ways that we would use to try to get certain information across to the shooters. And like, for example, for me with the Thinking Shooter, when I was in class, I would walk around and I would look at I would find some kids that were having issues, like, for example, reassembling their weapon, or they're not, following the command to load correctly and whatnot. So I'd be like, hey, think about what you're doing. Does that make sense, what you just did? Or would it make more sense to do it a different way? And why? Because I always wanted my students to think their way through problems and not just continue repeating the same issues and just blindly making the motions. They're just following the motions, not understanding what they're doing or why they're doing it. I want my students to understand that you can think. It's okay. It's a good thing. So I'd be like, hey, think about what you're doing. If that doesn't make sense, then make it make sense, right? That was a big thing I said all the time, was make it make sense, along with Thinking Shooter. So I would tell my students, like, hey, think about what you're doing. There's more to shooting than just shooting. Think about it. And then we would, I'd start adding that into, my classes and saying, hey, be a thinking shooter. Think about your actions. Think about what you're doing. Think about how what you're doing right now is affecting you later. And I would just started added that in classes of be a thinking shooter. We can train a monkey how to pull a trigger, but we want someone who can be behind the gun and pull the trigger accurately, but think through problems and situations. So I would do that, and then later on, whenever I would teach in my off time, I started incorporating that same phrase, thinking shooter, and I would tell my students, hey, be a thinking shooter, analyze your surroundings, and I would do different things, like while they're shooting or something, I would walk up behind them off to the side or something, and I would ask them questions while they're shooting. And like, realistically, you're not going to be in the middle of a gunfight and someone's going to come up and be like, hey, what's 2 + 2? But it's about analyzing situations and analyzing problems and understanding your equipment and understanding your weapon system and how to use it, things like that. So that's where I would just start incorporating it, right? So then I said it a lot. And so what was it? Me and some buddies were out on the range, and we had one friend of ours who I think it was the first time he had shot with us, went out with us, and he was relatively new to shooting. And we're out there shooting, and I'm trying to help him with some things, and he's just, he would jam his gun like limp wristing or not loading it in a most effective manner. And I'd be like, hey, think about what you're doing. If I do it this way, it works, but it's a little bit slower than if I do it this way, and it doesn't require as much movement, right? So be a thinking shooter. Think about these things, right? And so my other buddy came up. He said, hey, why don't you use that? I said, what are you talking about? And he was like, thinking shooter. I said, I literally just told him, be a thinking shooter. What do you want me to do? And he was like, no, for your channel you're coming up with, use thinking shooter as the channel name. I'm like, oh, you know what? I kind of like that. That's pretty cool. So that's where that came from. So let's go into what is a thinking shooter, right? So obviously I have the channel name Thinking Shooter and I use it a lot. So what exactly is it? So a thinking shooter is someone who understands a weapon is a tool, right? It's an extension of oneself, just like, for example, a carpenter or a painter. So carpenter, they've got hammers, not just hammers, they have different types of hammers. You've got ball peens, uh, engineering hammers, claw hammers, curved claw, straight claw, 16 ounce, 20 ounce, 24 ounce. They've got different levels and squares and saws and uh, all kinds of different equipment that they use when they build a house. And then you've got painters, they've got different types of paint brushes and paints. I'm not a painter. I don't know. Just go with me. I guarantee that example works for anyone out there who does painting. Think about it. Be a thinking painter. Um, yeah, and then you understand the function and full use of your weapon and how to use it effectively. So this is where being a thinking shooter, you get to the point where you're focusing less on the shooting aspect, the pulling the trigger aspect, and more on the how can I more beneficially make shooting fit into my environment. So you stop thinking less about like, okay, hold my breath, slow, steady squeeze, focus on the, you're not focusing on that. That's not what you're thinking about. That's shooting. Now you're focusing on the fighting aspect. There's a difference between fighting with a gun and shooting a gun, right? There's shooting, and then thinking shooters are fighting with a gun. They're understanding that concept. And then it moves into understanding how your gear slash peripheral equipment affect your abilities and effectiveness, right? So you have mag pouches and plate carriers and belts and LBs and holsters and helmets and slings and all kinds of other crap, right? How does that stuff affect your shooting and affect your ability to do certain things and your effectiveness, right? How does all that stuff affect it? A thinking shooter understands how that stuff affects it. And then a thinking shooter also understands how to implement all of that extra gear and peripheral equipment to make it work, because there's theory and then there's practical application where you understand in theory how this stuff makes a difference, and then there's actually understanding how to use it effectively to make a difference. And then thinking shooters, they're able to comprehend your surroundings, and you have that situational awareness, that SA for short, Sierra Alpha. Um, you're able to comprehend your scenarios and your situations, right? For example, you go to a restaurant. Are you able to identify, where exits are located, or are you able to see where different groups of, you don't have to be one of those like James Bond nerds. It's like there are exactly 104 people in here. No, you don't need to know how many people are in there, but it'd be ideal to know like where groups of people are at. So let's say you've got a group of people sitting right in front of an emergency exit. That would be handy information to know. especially if that's the one closest to you. If a fire breaks out, how close are you to a fire extinguisher or that emergency exit that's covered by 100 people? Um, Things like that. Are you one of those that you constantly look down at your phone the whole time you're at a restaurant, or I don't know, maybe look up and see what's going on? Um, if when you're in restaurants, do you try to strategically place yourself in the restaurant if you're able to? If it's one of those like go seat yourself places, uh, do you just okay, whatever, I'll sit in the middle of the restaurant and look down at my phone the whole time? Yeah, no. So that's kind of things to consider, right? And then a thinking shooter is someone who is also a forward thinker, and by forward thinker, I mean you're able to kind of uh, look. You're able to kind of prepare for different scenarios. For example, if someone comes in, let's say you're at Olive Garden, right? And someone comes in and they're just ranting and raving and screaming at a manager and everything. Are you able to uh, react to that situation if it were to escalate? And by forward thinker, I'm not saying you have to be able to predict the future and be like, they're going to punch the waiter and a huge fight's going to break out, and then this dude's go over here is going to bring out a gun. No, what I'm saying is, are you able to perceive if something might escalate? And if it does, are you prepared to be able to react to that? Are you able to have a plan for wherever you go? Are you out with, is it just you? Are you out with your significant other? Do you have kids? Do you have any old people you have to watch over or help get out of the building? Um, you're constantly planning and thinking about all these different things, and yeah, that's what forward thinking is it's preparing for possible outcomes. You're not trying to like predict like, oh, this is going to escalate, and like every time you go to Olive Garden a fight's going to break out or something. um but you're trying to think ahead of, in the event something did happen, how do I either evade or neutralize the situation, right? How do I get out of the area if something happens? How do I neutralize the situation if something happens? Am I in an advantageous, goodness, I can't speak English, an advantageous position to react to that if it were to escalate? Things like that. That's forward thinking. And then again, yeah, understanding the difference between shooting and fighting with a gun. Huge difference. Uh, if you're not sure, then you might want to evaluate kind of your stance and your position on some things. Uh, and then again, a thinking shooter is someone who understands that there's more than just shooting. That goes back to that understanding, your weapon, and understanding that you need to get to a point where you run it, it's just there, right? You make it fit into your scenario, kind of like cell phones, right? So how much thought do you put into using this thing? You just pull it out and start using it. It's second nature for the most part. You're just like, oh, hey, how's it going, Jimmy? You just, you don't think about it. You don't be like, okay, now push the power button, unlock it, go down to my messages, and now type, right? You just do the thing, right? You know the thing, right? Um, there's more to it than just doing the shooting. You're actually making the shooting aspect fit into whatever scenario you need it to. Because shooting is the last thing you should be thinking about. It's all the other stuff. Shooting should be second nature. And then actively training. That's the thinking shooter, is you actively train. For one, how often are you training? For two, what are you training? And for three, is it effective training? There's a difference between training and effective training. Kind of like going out to the shooting range. You get people who are like, "Oh yeah, I go to the range all the time," and then they can't hit the broadside of the barn if they're in the barn because they just go and they just burn ammo. You can get more training out of 50 rounds of effective and disciplined shooting than 1,000 rounds of ammo mag dumps, right? If you just go to the range and you're just like, "Ka-pa, pa, 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 pa," and you're just burning stuff off versus you go to the range with 50 rounds, for one, you're learning to maximize what you are trying to do with what you have. And for two, you are focusing on a specific aspect to advance your training, to get better at something. And then something else, the flip side of that is how are you feeding your training, right? For example, shooting. Ammo's expensive, especially nowadays with everything going on. For one, if you can find the ammo. For two, for a reasonable price. One of the things that I do, for those of you that are watching this, if you look back there, you can see that blue thing. I reload, and that is how or one of the ways anyway, that I feed my training habits is, yeah, I reload. Ammo's expensive. It's hard to come by. It's gotten a lot easier now, and I do buy ammo. I'm not saying I reload every single round that I shoot, but I can generally reload it for a lot cheaper as long as I can find the components. If I can't, then I'm stuck shooting factory stuff, and that's fine, you know. Uh, but it's all about how are you feeding it. You know, if you do martial arts or something, you know, I don't know if you need, like, if you're doing like jujitsu or something and you need a certain type of um, gi. I can't remember what they call them for jujitsu. I know I took karate a long time ago, and we called them gis. Uh, or I think we even called them that when I took taekwondo. Whatever. That was a long time ago. So yeah, if you need certain things to do your training, you know, and even go, let's talk about that for a second. Let's get off topic of training for thinking shooter, because this is your overall training. Let's talk about martial arts for a second, right? So martial arts, I was talking about your uniform, your gi, or whatever it is you wear. Um, when you're doing that, do you ever train while not in your uniform that you're uh, would do your martial arts training in? Because realistically, if you're out on the street and someone jumps you, are you going to be in your gi? Are you going to be in blue jeans and a button up, or a dress, or a mini skirt, or wearing cowboy boots instead of barefoot? You know what? That's the other aspect to it, is train in realistic scenarios, and don't. I mean, staging for training has a place, because you're isolating and you're working on a very specific thing when you do that, which is why in martial arts they wear things like that, because you're working on a specific thing. You're trying to focus on getting the technique and the aspects of understanding down, and then you apply it in a more modern and realistic scenario. So that's where a lot of martial arts places are starting to do things like plain clothes training, where, okay, cool, you start here, but once you get to a certain point, like, all right, cool, show up to class wearing your normal whatever you wear every day type of thing, right? So you can start applying that. So when you go to the range, it flat work is great. Your flat range work is wonderful. It's great. Put on the exterior holster, your super operator stuff with your plate carrier and your, you know, battle belt and all that stuff. That's awesome. That's great stuff. Great training. But if you're downtown with the wife and kid, or kids, uh, are you going to have all that crap on? If something happens, what are you most likely going to be wearing? It's important to be training from how you normally go about your day. You know, if you appendix carry, if you know, carry small back or something, you need to be training from that as well. Um, things to consider, right? So that's what a thinking shooter is. I talked on that for a long time, so I'm going to go through now. I'm going to give you guys kind of a background on me, to help you make your determination as to, you know, hey, I want to listen to this dude, or no, screw this guy, he's dumb. Um, so my background is, so I've been active duty for a little over 9 years, from the filming of this video. Like I said, I am in the military. I'm currently combat arms, which is an instructor slash armorer. That's what combat arms is in the Air Force. In my off time, I do firearms instruction. I do armoring, some gunsmithing, and I used to shoot competitively, and then um, I shot for a few years, and then my wife and I decided to expand our family, and God blessed us with a child. So I reprioritized some stuff and haven't had a chance to get back out and compete, which I'd like to at some point, but my family is my number one priority. I've been shooting for about 25 years, something like that. I forgot to put that down on my little slideshow here. I've been doing some gunsmithing stuff for about 14-ish years, something like that. My dad is a gunsmith and also a firearms instructor, so figures. I kind of grew up with it. I know a lot of kids grew up working on like cars and stuff, and you know, Corvette and Mustang. Blah. I'm not a motorhead. I hate working on cars. I can do some stuff if I have to, but no, I hate doing it. Um, yeah, so I've got many different armor certs or certifications. Excuse me, trying to be professional. I've got many different armor certs. I am Duracoat application certified. I'm a certified Duracoat applicator. I've done a lot of Cerakote. In fact, that's one of the things I currently do a lot of at work, as well as hot bluing or hot caustic. I do a lot of Duracoat, Cerakote, and hot bluing. A lot of finishes. Some of my favorite weapons or types of firearms to work on are precision rifles, 1911s, and AKs. This is starting to sound a lot like a dating profile here. Um, I've been instructing for about 9 years, and it did start before I went combat arms. Notice I said I've been active for about 9.5, so I started teaching uh, people how to shoot before I went combat arms. I honestly, actually, it might be longer than that because I think I started before I joined the military, where I started teaching people how to shoot. Uh, I so some of my background where I got my experience shooting is, for one, like I said, I've been shooting for 25-ish years. Um, I grew up with it, as I said. My dad is a firearms instructor and gunsmith as well, so I grew up with that. My dad was in the Marine Corps too, so he did firearms instruction for them and went and did stuff in the Marine Corps. Um, that he's got a lot of experience teaching people and doing it as well. So I grew up with that, and then as I got older and joined the military, I've gotten the opportunity to work at certain places that provided me opportunities to learn and do a lot more stuff. So, for example, when I was in at my first duty station, I worked with a specialized response unit. Um, we were basically like a glorified SWAT team, right? We did a lot of really cool stuff. Don't get me wrong, um, and some of the guys would even try to be like, "Oh yeah, I'm basically an operator. I'm basically a Navy SEAL." And no, no, we weren't. We weren't operators. We weren't special operations. We were more than your basic, average security forces guy. But it was just because we got the opportunity to go and learn some different cool stuff, but it wasn't just because of the unit. There's a lot of different units across the globe that provide security forces opportunities to go and learn different cool stuff, right? I flew around in helicopters, did a lot of CQB and CQC training, which is your focus on like building and room clearing and things like that. That's your CQB and tactics and whatnot. That's a lot of fun. I really enjoyed learning and doing all of that stuff. We did a lot of field training, so like IMT and SUT, which is your individual movement techniques and small unit tactics, and that's where you're learning to move as a group through areas and your different formations of how you set up your fire teams and everything. Went through what is called the assaulters course, which was your uh, your specialized response unit operator basic training, if you will, where they teach you the basics of room clearing and all this other stuff that goes more in depth and more advanced than what we learned in our technical school when we first joined the military, right? That's where it gets into the okay. Here's what they taught you in tech school. Forget that. Here's how you actually do it. Let's learn this and start doing that. And then when you go back to your home station, you continue training. That's we trained like all day, every day. It was awesome. I loved working there. And then I got the opportunity to go to NATM, which, for simple terms, is Air Force Sniper School. Uh, I won't go too much into that, but I got the opportunity to learn how to shoot really far, uh, and had a lot of fun with it. I shot out to a mile while I was there with the M107, which is the 50 caliber sniper rifle from Barrett, or on the civilian side, it's the M82A1. We shot out to, I think we consistently shot out to about 1,100 meters with the M24, the Remington 700 sniper rifle in 308 or 7.6251. Excuse me. Uh, I've attended many different shooting schools since then that I've pursued in my own time, and gotten the opportunity to do through the military, but wasn't a military affiliated school. Um, like for example, I went through Redback One. Look those guys up. The guy that teaches, I can't remember his name. He's a tall Australian dude. He was hilarious. He was a great instructor. He came down and did a class for the special operations guys, and they happened to have an open slot, and I was offered the opportunity to go through the course, and I jumped on that. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. I did another one. This one I did in my off time was a Kyber training. They did their light sights and lasers tour. That was a lot of fun. I did that in my off time. That wasn't affiliated with the military. But those are just two examples. I've done many different other things. I've got, like I said, different armors courses. I've got the Glock basic and advanced course. I've got the SIG 320. Uh, all the different weapon systems we work on in the military. I'm obviously certified to work on those things. Uh, yeah, so that's a pretty good background. I'll just give you that. That's a background as to me and my experience and whatnot. Now on to what to expect from the channel here. So what to expect from the channel. It's, to sum it up, basically going to be anything and everything gun related that I want to make a video on that I think would be beneficial for the channel and for you guys. I've got a lot of experience and a lot of knowledge that I would love to be able to share with you guys, because I understand that training and knowledge is not cheap. It is expensive. It costs money to learn this stuff, and I enjoy getting information out and teaching other folks, as well as doing it. So in no way am I advocating, hey, my channel will replace all the physical hands-on training you could ever need. Buy this DVD here. No, go out, get training. This is a supplement. This is just some stuff to help add or maybe clarify some stuff, hopefully. But things to expect are, we're going to talk about different scenarios, things to think about. Like, for example, earlier I was talking about being in Olive Garden and something happens. We'll talk about different scenarios. And I'm not going to tell you how you should react, but what I will do is I will give you scenarios to think about, hey, am I actually prepared to react this way if it were to come down to that? Am I willing to do what needs to be done? If you're walking at home at night, and you're walking alone, and your car's parked in a dark spot and you hear someone walk behind you, I'll give different scenarios. And again, like I said, I'm not going to tell you what you should do. I'm just going to give you different things to think about to help you be that, thinking shooter. We'll talk about weapon selections and setups. Be talking about guns a lot. The setups of said weapons. Why would I pick one gun over another? Why would I set it up one way over another? Your peripheral equipment selection and setup. A lot of selection and setup for different things. Like I said, your peripheral equipment, like your optics and lasers and hand grips and I should make a song out of that, like optics and lasers and hand grips and buttstocks. Uh, yeah, things like that. Gear selection, plate carriers, belts, holsters, mag pouches. We'll talk about maintenance and how tos, and I'll do the obligatory. Hey, welcome to YouTube. Let's build an AR. I'll do some AR builds as well as some other stuff. But yeah, it's mainly just going to be like, hey, upkeep. What are some good things to do to make my gun run longer? And we'll talk about different parts and why would I pick this brand over this brand, or does it matter? Uh, why is High Point bad? We'll talk about different drills and some instructions, some things to help you guys. If maybe you're not so proficient in certain areas and you'd like to advance your shooting and get a little bit better at certain things, then maybe I can give you some information that might be the exact same information you'd find somewhere else on YouTube, but maybe I present it in a manner that you like a little better, that helps you. Ultimately, that is my goal, is to just help you guys out. That's what I'm after here. We will be doing reviews. In fact, I've already got some reviews lined up. I'm going to be doing some scope reviews because I love long range shooting. That is something else we will be discussing here on the channel. But we'll be doing reviews of whatever, optics and buttstocks and forends and magazines. Just all kinds of different things. If tools, like I said, I do gunsmithing and armoring. We'll talk about different tools. Why, if you want to get into it or you want to know just enough to help you get by to not have to go see a gunsmith, what are some things to look at? Things like that. We will be, as I mentioned earlier, we got the reload and press back there. We'll talk about some reloading and load development. Like I said, I love doing long range shooting. That's something I will talk about on here. We'll talk about some load development. What's involved in that if you're looking to get into it. And then again, shooting, just if it's shooting, we'll talk about shooting. Or if I just want to be like, hey, look at this cool thing I just did by shooting. I just, uh, threw a clay pigeon in the air, put a pinch of chew in, and then pulled up and shot it before it hit the ground. Yeah, we'll talk about just if it's just a cool shooting thing I want to show, whatever, we'll do that. And then miscellaneous, just whatever I feel like shooting or talking about. If you guys think of something that you're like, hey, you seem like a knowledgeable young gentleman on YouTube who knows things because you're on the internet, I think it would be great if you would talk about this particular topic, or hey, we would like to see this. Please let me know down in the comments. Yeah, so just whatever. That's what to expect from the channel. Just anything and everything gun related. So in closing, I know this has been a long video, but welcome to the channel. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you for sticking around to this point. Make sure you leave a comment telling me what you guys thought. If you thought that I talked way too much and need to just shut up and get to the point, or if you're like, hey, please expound more upon something. If there's something you'd like to see, let me know down in the comments. Again, make sure you hit that like, subscribe button. Make sure you share this with anyone you think might enjoy listening to me ramble. Also, hit that notification bell. And yeah, hopefully we can get some stuff on here that you guys would like to see. Stay tuned. And I think I'm going to make my sign off make it make sense. Later.